Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight, you're not a patient on a battlefield stretcher, or a coma case in a medical drama, or a miracle headline waiting to happen. No, you're something far quieter, more terrifying. You're awake, entirely, tragically, and no one knows it. You've got locked-in syndrome. Your brain is perfectly intact, humming along like a machine in a factory no one visits anymore. But your body? It's done. Arms, legs, lips, all off the clock. You can hear the doctor say there's no hope. You can see your sister crying at your bedside, but you can't move. You can't speak. You can't even blink. Not yet. So before you drift into that soft, terrifying paralysis, maybe from under a weighted blanket, maybe from a hospital bed that beeps too cheerfully, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. And if you want early access to more softly whispered horror stories and other perks like ad-free audio of these episodes, there's a link to the Patreon below. But for now, settle in, sink deep, try not to imagine being trapped in your own body, completely aware and utterly alone. Let's begin. You wake up, but nothing wakes with you. No muscles stir, no joints stretch, no eyelids flutter. Your first sensation is sound, low voices muffled through layers of cotton and static. The kind of voices people use when they think you can't hear them. One of them says your name, softly, like it's already a eulogy. You try to respond, of course. A twitch of the lips, a grunt, even just a sigh. But nothing happens. The command goes out from your brain, clean, clear, orderly, and then disappears into the void. The wires are cut, and no one sent a memo. Your limbs might as well be furniture. Your face might as well belong to someone else. Your lungs still inflate, your heart still beats, and you're absolutely, completely awake. That's the worst part. You're not slipping out of consciousness, you're swimming in it. Alone. You think, maybe this is a dream. A nightmare stitched from every medical drama you've half-watched while falling asleep on the couch. The lighting is too sterile. The sheets are stiff in that way. Hospital linens always are. Bleached and industrial, like they were boiled instead of laundered. You can't feel them exactly, but you know they're there. You sense their texture, the way you might remember the smell of chlorine or the stickiness of tape on skin. Abstract but unmistakable, the fluorescent lights above hum like bees inside your skull, and your body, the body you've always carried without thought, is now something else. Entirely. Not paralyzed. That implies stillness. This is absence, like someone erased you with a scalpel and forgot to fill in the blank space. You try again to move. Anything. A finger. A toe. You push your will into your limbs like a battering ram. Still nothing. Not even a tingle. Your body isn't resisting. It's ignoring you. If your brain were a radio, your limbs are no longer tuned in. They're static, or worse, turned off. Panic bubbles up, hot and rising, but you have nowhere to put it. No breath to gasp with, no mouth to scream through, just thoughts ricocheting in your skull like trapped hornets. You are a mind without a voice, a person without a body, and the only evidence that you're still alive is the sound of your heart beating in your ears, which, by the way, is incredibly loud when you have no other distractions. It's not the comforting thump-thump you're used to. It's the heavy, meaty sound of a pump keeping a prisoner alive. Someone walks into the room. You can't see them, not really, but the air shifts. A subtle pressure change, the soft squeak of shoes, the click of something plastic against metal. Maybe a clipboard. You try to look. Your eyes don't move. Your head stays fixed, a statue bolted to a pillow. You can't even blink. That's when it really sinks in. Not just that you can't move, but that you can't signal anyone that you're in here. Inside this useless meat suit, fully conscious, fully aware, and utterly invisible, you're Schrodinger's patient, alive and not alive, and no one knows which. They talk about you like you're already gone. Poor thing, one of them says. Still no response. The other murmurs something about scans, about damage, about waiting to see. You want to laugh, but your diaphragm doesn't take requests. What a surreal comedy. You, trapped inside your own mind, listening to two strangers, decide your future based on how still you are. As if stillness equals absence. As if motion was the only proof you ever existed. You want to tell them that you're in here, that you heard every word, that you're not brain dead, just body dead. But nothing comes out. Not a blink, not a twitch, just the deafening silence of someone no one thinks is listening. Time becomes a soup. You don't know how long you've been like this. Minutes, hours, days. Sleep might have come at some point, but you can't tell. Your internal clock is useless. There's no night or day here, just overhead lighting and muted hallway echoes. You drift in and out of something like rest, but never peace. Your dreams, when they come, are slippery and irrelevant. Mostly, you're just awake, endlessly, relentlessly awake. You try counting heartbeats. You try reciting books you once knew by heart. You try meditating, praying, bargaining with nothing. But there's no one to hear you. Just you and the unchanging ceiling and the thoughts that keep folding back in on themselves like origami of panic. Eventually, you manage to focus on something. A noise, the beep of a machine, constant and repetitive. You start timing it in your head. 1 beat, 2, 3, over and over. You imagine the waveform on a monitor. A little green spike marking every breath someone else is measuring for you. You realise that your body isn't yours anymore. It belongs to the machines now, to the people checking charts. You are not participating in your life. You're being kept in it, like an antique under glass. And yet, you're still you, still thinking, still remembering your name, your favourite food, the way your mother's perfume smelled in the hallway. The human mind is grotesquely stubborn. It clings, it catalogues, it refuses to shut down, even when everything else has. And in that stubbornness, something awful begins to grow. Not hope, not yet, just a thin strand of fear wrapped in observation. A quiet, unbearable truth you cannot unthink. This might be it. This might be all there is now. And no one knows you're still here. Let's take a moment to zoom out. You've already lived through the panic, the moment of realization, the slow suffocation of identity beneath stillness. But let's talk about the label they eventually give you. Locked-in syndrome. Sounds dramatic, doesn't it? Like something from a made-for-TV thriller. A condition so rare and horrifying that it barely feels real, except that it is excruciatingly real. Clinically, it's defined as a neurological disorder in which a person is fully conscious and cognitively intact, but completely paralysed, unable to move or speak. The eyes might still work, if you're lucky, but otherwise, you're a sentient mind sealed inside an unresponsive body. Think of it as being buried alive in your own skin, except no one brought a shovel. The official name for the most common variant is classic locked-in syndrome. There's also incomplete and total versions, because apparently medical classification wasn't already bleak enough. In the classic form, you can still move your eyes vertically and blink, just enough to communicate through slow-motion Morse code if someone's patient and observant enough to notice. In the total form, though, even the eyes are gone. You're still conscious, still thinking, still listening, but even your last remaining lifeline to the outside world has snapped. That version is rare, but then again, so is surviving this long in the first place. Most often, the culprit is a stroke, specifically a catastrophic one in the pons, that friendly little nub in your brainstem that quietly handles most of your motor control, breathing, swallowing, and facial movement. The pons isn't flashy. It doesn't handle memory or dreams or abstract thinking. It's just a switchboard that lets the rest of your brain talk to your body. And when that switchboard is fried, say by a clot or a hemorrhage, the lights stay on upstairs, But no one answers the door. Sometimes the cause is trauma, car accidents, falls. In rare cases, diseases like ALS, tumours, or even infections can produce the same result. But however you get there, the ending is the same. Awareness without agency. Cognition without control. You, trapped inside you. People often confuse locked-in syndrome with a coma or vegetative state. To be fair, they all involve a lot of not moving, but the differences are massive. In a coma, the brain is essentially offline. You're unconscious and unresponsive, and you don't experience time or pain or anything at all. A vegetative state is trickier. Some brain activity, some reflexes, maybe even random eye movement or moaning, but no real awareness. Locked-in syndrome is the reverse. The lights are fully on. You're aware, alert, processing. You just can't tell anyone. If a coma is being asleep and a vegetative state is being on screensaver mode, then locked-in syndrome is being wide awake in a straitjacket, in a soundproof room, behind a one-way mirror. And yet people still get it wrong. Doctors misdiagnose it. Families assume you're gone. It's not even always obvious on scans, depending on the cause. You might look serene, peaceful even, a body resting, a brain slowly fading, but inside you're screaming into the void, trying to find the emergency exit from a building no one else knows is on fire. The cruelty of locked-in syndrome isn't just physical, it's existential. It strips away every tool humans use to prove they're alive. Speech, gesture, expression, reaction. What's left? Just cognition. And unfortunately, that's the one thing nobody else can see. Medically speaking, diagnosis usually hinges on someone, often a very tired nurse, noticing that your eyes track movement, that you blink on command, that something is happening in there. Until then, you're just another silent body in a bed, waiting to either wake up or expire. In some rare cases, patients have spent months misdiagnosed before someone finally realised they weren't unconscious, just ignored. It's not even always malevolent. Sometimes it's just a system not built to catch anomalies. Machines measure breathing, blood pressure, pupil dilation. They don't measure the look of horror behind the eyes. And here's the grim kicker. Even once they figure it out, not much changes. Sure, the diagnosis might make your chart more interesting. You might get a neurologist who pops in now and then with a clipboard and a hopeful smile, but the reality stays the same. You're still trapped, still dependent on machines, still blinking your way through conversations that take hours to finish. People say, it must be such a relief to finally be understood. Yes, in the way a drowning person must feel relieved to find a straw poking through the surface. There's something uniquely dehumanizing about being paralyzed and fully aware in a culture that treats stillness as absence. If you can't respond, people assume you aren't listening. If you can't speak, they assume you have nothing to say. But locked-in syndrome is proof that the mind isn't bound to the body. Not in any kind way, at least. You are conscious, trapped, enduring, and that endurance, it isn't noble, it isn't romantic, it's a slow-motion nightmare, where the villain is your own biology, and the hero forgot how to use a phone. And now that we've named the prison, we can talk about how you got locked inside. You didn't fall off a cliff, you didn't get stabbed in the spine, or contract some exotic virus in a jungle you never visited. No, your descent into full-body imprisonment happened the way most locked-in syndromes do. Quietly, efficiently, and without warning. A stroke. Specifically, one in the brainstem. That part of your brain that sounds boring in anatomy class, but turns out to be essential for literally everything that makes a body function. It's called the pons, which sounds like something soft and friendly. Maybe a cartoon character. It is not. The pons is the narrow, crucial bridge between your brain and your body. And it turns out that if that bridge collapses, nothing gets through. Not movement, not speech, not even a smile. Your brain is still up there in the control tower, calmly issuing commands, but the runway is gone and all the planes are crashing into the sea. Let's walk through the basics of what happened, because it's not just morbid curiosity, it's also educational, in that uncomfortable, this could happen to anyone sort of way. Strokes are either ischemic or hemorrhagic. The first means a blood clot blocked the flow, like a cork jammed into a pipe. The second means a blood vessel burst and flooded the area, like a plumbing disaster, but with way worse consequences. In your case, it was probably ischemic, a clot, maybe from high blood pressure, or an undiagnosed heart condition, or genetics finally cashing in their chips. The clot worked its way through your bloodstream until it hit the basilar artery, which feeds the pons. And just like that, everything downstream lost power. Not slowly, not gradually, immediately. Now here's the real horror. Your higher brain, the cortex, is fine. Memory, logic, personality, awareness, all untouched. It's like having a perfectly functioning computer with the monitor and keyboard yanked out. Everything's still running. You just can't interact with the world anymore. The damage doesn't touch the parts of the brain that let you think about running, only the parts that actually make your legs move. In that way, it's almost poetic. Your body has gone mute, but your mind hasn't stopped talking, and it won't shut up. Ever. The pons is responsible for relaying signals between the cerebrum, where you do your conscious thinking, and the cerebellum and spinal cord, where all the movement and coordination happens. It's the switchboard operator of your nervous system, and when it's destroyed, you get silence on the line. Imagine calling every part of your body from the control room of your brain and hearing nothing but static in return. Hello, hands, feet, tongue, are you there? Nothing. They've all clocked out, maybe permanently. You're sending perfectly clear instructions into a void, and that void now defines your entire physical existence. You might wonder why it's just the movement that goes. Why not memory? Why not thought? And the answer, ironically, is that nature designed the human brain with just enough compartmentalization to make this outcome possible. The stroke surgically removes your ability to act without so much as scratching your ability to want to act. That's the special cruelty of locked-in syndrome. It leaves the craving for movement fully intact. You still want to scratch your nose, roll your eyes, or bolt from the room in a panic. You just can't, ever. That bridge, the pon, is like a drawbridge that's been permanently raised. Your thoughts are still pacing on one side, and your body is waiting on the other, wondering why no one's come to work. And make no mistake, this isn't rare in the way shark attacks or lightning strikes are rare. Brainstem strokes account for a small but significant percentage of all strokes, and unlike cortical strokes, they often don't cause slurred speech or facial droop. They just shut everything down at once, often without much warning. One moment you're fine, the next, you're blinking up at fluorescent lights, unable to move a single muscle, while someone asks if you've been responsive today. You want to say, define responsive, but your lips are part of the problem now. If you're lucky, and that word feels increasingly sarcastic, your eyes are spared. Vertical movement and blinking are usually controlled by a slightly different part of the brain stem that sometimes avoids the damage. That's your only lifeline. 2 flickers of motion in a body of silence. If that's intact, you have a chance to communicate. If not, welcome to total locked-in syndrome, a condition so rare and awful, it feels like a cruel footnote in a neurology textbook. Either way, the stroke has made its mark. One tiny clot, smaller than a paperclip, has detonated your life, like a landmine. And no one saw it coming. At some point, a doctor will sit down with your family and gently explain the situation. They'll use terms like severe brainstem infarction and guarded prognosis. What they mean is, your brain survived, but the exit routes didn't. The damage is irreversible. There is no surgery to undo it, no pill to fix it. The best they can offer is support, feeding tubes, ventilators, and maybe eventually a spelling board, if you're lucky enough to be one of the ones who can blink. Congratulations. You didn't die, you just lost everything but your thoughts. And those, as you're beginning to realise, are louder than ever. Time doesn't pass the same way anymore. It doesn't march, it doesn't drift, it coils, it stretches, it collapses inward like a dying star. You are now fully inside your own mind, and there is no off switch, no rest, no real sleep. Just consciousness without distraction, like being locked in a dark, echoing room with only your thoughts for company. And your thoughts are not kind. At first, they repeat themselves, simple, desperate phrases, over and over. What happened? Can they see me? Why can't I move? The questions don't get answers, just the rhythm of your panic building until it drowns everything else out. You used to think silence was peaceful. Now you know it's just the absence of escape routes. Eventually, the panic loses its sharpness. Not because it goes away, but because your brain runs out of new ways to express it. Fear becomes ambient. Background noise, always there, like static behind every thought. You start cataloguing your memories, not because you want to revisit them, but because it's all you have. You sort through your childhood birthdays, your favourite songs, the way your house smells after rain. You remember the embarrassing things too. Every awkward conversation, every regret, every stupid lie you told in middle school, and nothing distracts you from any of it. There are no notifications, no television, no social media, no errands to run or bills to pay, just your own unfiltered mind, looping through the greatest hits and deepest cuts like a cursed mixtape on repeat. Grief arrives next, slow and sticky. You grieve your body, your future, your voice. You grieve the version of yourself that used to stretch when waking up, or clear your throat before speaking, or yawn just to feel your lungs expand. That person feels like a dream now, a half-remembered silhouette with privileges you didn't know were privileges. Every itch you can't scratch is a reminder. Every unseen tear on your cheek is proof you're still in here. And that grief, left unspoken, festers. It mutates into anger. The rage is quiet at first, controlled, polite. You get mad at your body for failing you, at the clot or bleed that turned you into furniture, at the nurse who walked past your bed without looking at your face, but mostly you're angry at the helplessness, at the sheer unfairness of being present but invisible. You want to scream, you want to flip a table, you want to punch a wall, but you can't even clench your fist. The rage has nowhere to go. So it turns inward, it sharpens itself, and starts carving at your sense of self. Was it something you did? Something you missed? You start bargaining with nothing. If I can move just one finger, I'll be good. If I wake up tomorrow and my tongue works, I'll be grateful forever. If I survive this, I'll never complain again. But your body does not negotiate. It does not care about your promises. And so the bargaining becomes just another phase in the loop. Sometimes you think you're going crazy, not because you're losing grip on reality, but because reality has become unbearable in its simplicity. You know what day it is, roughly. You know the names of the people who enter the room, the ones who speak around you, not to you, but their world is behind glass now. They exist in a dimension you can't reach. You're a ghost haunting your own life. You scream in your mind again and again, and nothing changes. You've learned that awareness without agency is not a gift, it's a curse. It's being alive in all the ways that hurt and none of the ways that help. You start creating routines just to stay sane, counting ceiling tiles, repeating poems you vaguely remember, mapping out your memories like a filing cabinet you can open and close at will. Some days you imagine elaborate meals. Other days you mentally redecorate your childhood bedroom just for something to do. You start to recognize the exact moment when your thoughts begin to spiral, when they shift from manageable discomfort into unbearable noise, and you try, futilely, to steer them elsewhere. but you are always with yourself, and yourself is getting harder to live with. And yet, you adapt, not because it gets easier, but because the human mind refuses to give up without a fight. You begin to recognize the specific rhythms of your emotional collapse. You name the phases, the grief hour, the memory surge, the rage circuit. Naming them helps a little. It gives shape to the fog. You start to imagine that you're narrating this to someone else, somewhere, that your experience is being documented, that your thoughts matter. Because if they don't, what's left? Hope hasn't arrived. It's not time for that. What arrives now is something quieter. Not acceptance, not peace, just endurance. The cold, unglamorous kind. The kind that doesn't want a medal or a headline. You are not thriving. You are not growing. You are just still here. And that somehow has to be enough. They think you're gone. That's the strangest part. You're lying there, trapped in your body, thoughts as clear as ever, and all around you, people are mourning like you've already left. You can hear them. You hear everything. Every whispered conversation, every shuffling footstep, every sterile beep from machines that now do half the work your body used to handle, effortlessly. The doctors speak in measured tones, with that practiced detachment that only comes from routine tragedy. They're not cruel, just resigned. They say things like no meaningful response and poor prognosis and vegetative state. They say, we'll give it a few more days, as if you're a stubborn houseplant. You want to scream. You want to thrash your limbs, grab someone by the collar and make them understand. But of course you can't. You just blink, and they're not even looking. At some point someone mentions brain death. The phrase is casual, offhand. They're reviewing your chart. You hear the term like it's a possible direction on a roadmap they're still plotting. Brain death, that's the legal, clinical endpoint. The irreversible cessation of all brain activity. But that's not you. You're not brain dead. Your mind is doing somersaults. You remember who you are. You know where you are. You're calculating the hours based on the shift changes and trying to remember the names of the people you hear talking near your bed. But to them, you're just a warm body in a cool bed, slowly crossing the line from patient to memory. Your family visits. Maybe it's your mother, your spouse, a sibling. Someone you love is sitting at your bedside, holding your hand, saying your name in that breaking voice people use when they're trying not to lose hope. And still you can't respond, not yet. You try everything. You pour every ounce of yourself into blinking, twitching, moving even the smallest muscle. But the wires are still cut, and the look on their face, that flicker of devastation when you don't answer, it carves into you more deeply than the stroke ever did. You want to scream that you're still here, that you're trying, that you hear every word. But their silence in response says what they believe. You're gone. This happens more often than people want to admit. Locked-in syndrome is rare, but not mythical. And yet, because it looks like unconsciousness and sounds like nothing, it's easy to mistake for other conditions. Coma, persistent vegetative state, catatonia. Sometimes if your eyes aren't moving yet, they don't even know what to check for. You become a question mark with a hospital bracelet. A problem no one has time to solve. There are real cases, horrifying, documented cases, where people have spent weeks, even months, misdiagnosed as unaware. Some were treated as if they'd never wake up. Others were simply left. Not abused, not neglected, just quietly assumed to be unreachable. You can't blame every doctor. The scans don't always show what's wrong, but the assumption of absence, that's the real failure. That's what traps you harder than any paralysis ever could. Take Jean-Dominique, a French editor. One moment, he's living a full life. The next, locked in. Everyone thought he was gone until he started blinking. One eyelid, one letter at a time, he wrote an entire memoir from inside his frozen body. The diving bell and the butterfly. And the scariest part? No one believed he was still in there. until someone happened to look closely enough. Imagine how many others never got that chance. Imagine how many people died before anyone realised they were still thinking, still listening, still begging behind the silence. There was another case in Belgium, a man named Rom Huben. After a car crash, he was diagnosed as being in a vegetative state for over 20 years. 2 decades, he heard everything, every conversation, every assumption, every time someone said he was a shell of his former self. He lived that way until a new scan revealed he was, in fact, completely conscious, just unable to move or speak. 20 years of solitude, surrounded by people who had no idea they were being watched by the person they thought they'd lost. These are not ancient stories. They're recent, documented, studied, and they force a terrifying question. How many people have been labelled as gone when they weren't? How many were buried, unplugged, or written off simply because no one thought to look a little harder? Locked-in syndrome hides in plain sight. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't make noise, it just waits, patient and terrible. So you wait too, trapped in your own skin, surrounded by the language of loss and grief and gentle pity. They say things to each other like, he wouldn't want to live like this, and maybe it's better if he lets go. You want to shout that you never agreed to any of this, that you're not a ghost, that you are still here, but you have no voice, just a body they've given up on and a brain screaming into silence. And yet, you're not gone, not yet. It starts with a blink, just one. Not a spasm or a flutter or the accidental twitch of a muscle under sedation. A deliberate, willful blink. You pour everything into it. It's not elegant, it's barely noticeable, but someone sees it. Maybe it's a nurse leaning in closer than usual. Maybe it's a family member who hasn't stopped hoping. Maybe it's just Luke. But someone sees your eyelid move in a way that doesn't look random. They ask you to do it again. Blink once for yes, twice for no. You blink once. A pause. They ask again. Blink if you can hear me. You do. And just like that, you re-enter the world of the living. Not with a triumphant return, not with confetti or violins, but with a twitch of skin and a room suddenly filled with breathless silence. That's the moment you start to exist again. Barely. You haven't been healed, you haven't recovered, you're still locked in, still trapped in a body that refuses to move. But now, there's a crack in the wall. A small opening, proof. Your mind is intact. The nightmare has a witness. The people around you start talking to you differently. They speak directly to you, not about you. Slowly, they realise that this one tiny action, a blink, is your only way out. Not out of the condition, of course, but out of invisibility. It's not much, but compared to nothing, it's a miracle. And now comes the work, because communication, in your condition, is a full-time job. Forget talking. Forget typing. You're about to enter the world of yes-no questions and letterboards. Slow, painful systems designed for people with nothing else left. Someone sits beside you with a printed alphabet and points at each letter, waiting for your blink. A for yes. B for yes. C. Blink. There it is. That's your first letter. Then again. D, E, F. Blink. That's 2, and so on, until you have a word. Then a sentence. If they're lucky, they guess ahead and speed things up. If not, you spell every word like you're solving a crossword puzzle underwater. It's exhausting. Not just for you, but for whoever is helping. Every sentence is a marathon. Every thought you want to share becomes a negotiation with the laws of time and human patience. There's no small talk in locked-in syndrome. Every word has to be chosen like it matters. And if someone misunderstands you, if they guess the wrong word halfway through, you have to start over. Blink by blink, letter by letter. Modern texting feels like luxury now. You used to complain when autocorrect changed your ha-ha to ga-ga. Now you'd sell your soul to autocorrect anything. Some places have more advanced systems, eye-tracking devices that let you select letters on a screen by looking at them, or switch-controlled software that can speak sentences aloud once you've selected the words. But those tools aren't always available, and even when they are, they take training, calibration, setup. You don't just wake up in a bed with an eye-controlled keyboard waiting for you like a dystopian upgrade. More often, it starts with the basics: laminated alphabets, yes-no charts, and someone patient enough to sit with you long enough to understand you're still in there. What you choose to say first might not be what people expect. It's rarely profound. You're not writing poetry or declaring love in that first conversation. More likely, it's something functional: cold, pain, thirst, maybe just hi. And then you'll wait as someone, usually crying a little, tries to keep it together long enough to ask what else you need. This is your new voice now. A flicker, a pause, a hope that they're paying close attention. Of course, not everyone around you adjusts right away. Some people will still speak slowly and loudly at you, as if being paralyzed has somehow made you hard of hearing or confused. Others will talk around you, forgetting that your eyes now count as speech. It's not always malice, just awkwardness. They don't know what to do with someone who communicates in Morse code with their eyelids. The world is built for fast talkers and fast texters, not for people who compose sentences with a metronome. Still, it's something. You've gone from a presumed corpse to a slow-moving mind-machine hybrid, from ghost to barely there participant. And for all the frustration, the exhaustion, the aching need to say something faster than one letter every 20 seconds, it's still better than being ignored. You're in the room now. Your voice is back, crude, flickering, and clumsy, but yours. And even as your eye muscles begin to ache, even as your mind begs for a faster way to speak, you keep blinking, because every blink is a rebellion. Every flicker says I'm here. Every completed word says you were wrong about me. And even if it takes you an hour to say something simple like, "Please adjust the pillow," it's still a victory. You are no longer lost. You are no longer silent. You're still locked in. But now, someone finally has the key. Or at least, the beginnings of one. The first sentence you manage to say isn't poetic. It's not an eloquent speech or a grand philosophical revelation. It's not even particularly complete. You're not Shakespeare blinking out a sonnet. You're just a person, scared, exhausted, and desperate to make someone understand. The sentence, when it finally comes together, might be, "I'm alive," or maybe "help me." 2 or 3 words spelled out over the course of several long, aching minutes. But when it's done, when the final letter is blinked into place and someone reads it aloud, the room changes. Everything shifts. You see it on their face, the realization, the dawning horror, and the terrible joy of knowing you're still in there. For the first time in what feels like forever, you've broken the silence. You've spoken, not out loud, but clearly. It takes work, an absurd, almost comical amount of work. Communication becomes an endurance sport. You've got a letterboard, a piece of laminated paper with the alphabet printed in neat rows. Someone sits beside you, finger poised, slowly pointing to each letter. You blink when they reach the right one. Sometimes they group the letters into clusters to speed things up. A through E, F through J, and so on. Blink when they're close, then blink again when they narrow it down. It still takes ages. You spell every word one agonizing letter at a time, hoping they don't misread your blink, praying you don't blink too early or too late. Mistakes mean starting over, and starting over, in this context, feels like digging a tunnel with a spoon and watching it collapse halfway through. Even simple phrases become projects. If you want to say, "I'm cold," you're looking at 10 letters, 2 words, and probably 5 full minutes of concentration and interaction. 10 letters may not sound like much until you remember each one is earned with a blink. A blink that must be timed with pinpoint precision, tracked by someone who might be tired, distracted, or new to the process. By the time the sentence is complete, your eye is sore, your head is throbbing, and you've forgotten half the other things you wanted to say. But it's said. You did it. You managed to express a basic human need using the only muscle your body hasn't locked away from you. Eventually, if the hospital is equipped and the staff knows what they're doing, you may be introduced to something more advanced than laminated paper. Eye tracking technology, for example. A camera mounted on a screen that follows your gaze. It lets you select letters or even full words just by looking at them long enough. There's a learning curve, and the calibration can be finicky. But once it's set up, it feels like jumping from Morse code to dial-up internet. Still painfully slow, but at least not medieval. Some systems can even speak for you, converting your selections into robotic-sounding speech. The voice doesn't sound like you, but it's yours. That synthetic monotone becomes your stand-in, your narrator, your interface with the world. Of course, there are drawbacks. The system needs power, a screen, a technician, and if anything malfunctioned, if the alignment is off, if the screen isn't cleaned, if the lighting is wrong, you're back to blinking. And blinking, while revolutionary, is still terribly fragile. People lose patience. They interrupt. They guess the wrong word before you finish spelling it. They assume they know what you're trying to say and move on. You become used to being halfway understood, to compromising with language, to giving up on half your sentences because the effort outweighs the reward. You start ranking your thoughts by urgency, by emotional return on investment. Is it worth spelling this out? Does it matter enough? Or should you just save the energy and say nothing? Eventually, you develop a kind of mental shorthand. You memorize common phrases, you pre-plan your responses, you build little scripts in your mind, so you're not always starting from scratch. You get faster, more efficient, but it never gets easy. People say communication is key, but they don't realize that your key is made of glass, and every time you use it, it cuts a little deeper. Still, you keep doing it, because blinking out a need, even something as simple as "I want music" or "turn the light off," reminds people that you're still in there, still thinking, still choosing, still human. Sometimes people cry when they read your messages, not because the messages are emotional, but because the act of hearing anything from you feels like witnessing a miracle. You've become a one-person seance, channeling your own voice from the other side of silence. It's strange being so powerful and so fragile at the same time, like holding fire in your hands, but only being able to light a single match at a time. This is your life now, a vocabulary of blinks, a grammar of eye movements. You won't be winning any speed typing competitions, and you won't be giving speeches anytime soon. But the world slowly begins to listen. You're not loud, you're not fast, but you are heard. And in a reality where most people thought you were gone, that is everything. Now that you've blinked your way back into existence, people don't know what to do with you. You're awake, you're aware, and that's supposed to be a good thing. But you're not better. You're not recovered. You're not going home next week with a wheelchair and a ramp installed out front. No, you're still locked in. Still motionless. Still silent, except for the blinking and occasional eye-controlled speech software that mispronounces your name. You exist now, technically, but that just makes things harder. Because once you're no longer a mystery or a tragedy in a coma bed, you become a logistical problem. The hospital doesn't have a handbook for someone like you. You're not in a coma, so you don't belong in the ICU forever. But you're not exactly ready for the rehab ward either. Rehab implies progress, movement, some kind of measurable improvement. You can't lift a finger. You can't swallow food. You can't even shift your weight to avoid bed sores without help. So where do they put you? Usually somewhere in between, in the kind of long-term care limbo that no one likes to talk about. You're alert, yes, but not autonomous. You're technically alive, but functionally unmanageable. And hospitals, despite the white coats and warm blankets, run on efficiency. You, unfortunately, are not efficient. Then there's the staff. Some are kind, some are curious, a few genuinely care, but many are uneasy. You're difficult. Not in the way that screams or thrashes or makes demands. Those kinds of patients are almost easier. You're difficult because you're quiet, because you watch, because you're present in a way that makes people self-conscious. You see how often they skip hand washing, how many times they talk about patients like they're not there. You become a mirror, and people don't like mirrors when they're sleep-deprived and overworked. They start speaking over you again. They cut off your blinking sentences. They guess what you mean, instead of waiting for you to finish spelling it. You learn to live in fragments, partial thoughts, interrupted truths. Outside the hospital, things get even more surreal. Insurance companies don't like you either. You're alive, which means you need services, but you're severely disabled, which means those services are expensive. They start asking questions. What's the prognosis? How long will you need care? Are you expected to improve? The answers, indefinite, constant, and probably not, are not the kind that get you approved for long-term funding. Suddenly your life is being measured in cost-to-benefit ratios. You become a spreadsheet entry with a $sign beside your name. Family members are dragged into the chaos. Someone has to make decisions on your behalf, sign forms, argue with billing departments, attend meetings with neurologists who use words like maintenance care and quality of life. Everyone wants to know if you're still in there, and even when you prove you are, the conversation doesn't really get better. If anything, it gets more uncomfortable, because now you're not a sleeping beauty waiting to wake. You're awake. You just don't fit the story people want to tell. You're not miraculous enough to be inspiring and not absent enough to mourn. You're in between, a living reminder that the human body can fail in ways too complicated for sympathy cards. Friends don't always stick around. At first there are visits, texts, well wishes, but they fade. It's hard to blame them. What do you say to someone who communicates by blinking? The conversations are slow, awkward, one-sided. People want their interactions to be fluid, spontaneous, easy. You are none of those things anymore. And so people pull away, not out of cruelty, just discomfort. They don't know how to sit with your silence. They don't know how to include you in a group chat or dinner party or vacation photo. You become the person they remember fondly, but from a distance. A before and after story they retell when they need to feel lucky. Even culturally, there's no real place for you. We like narratives with arcs. Tragedy followed by triumph. Illness followed by recovery. You don't have an arc. You have a plateau. You're the same today as you were yesterday, and maybe the same as you'll be in 6 months. That doesn't make a good movie. It doesn't fit into a viral post. No one wants to share an inspirational story that ends with, and now she blinks full sentences, but still can't move her arms. So you're left out of the narrative. Your existence doesn't serve the drama people crave, and your resilience, quiet, grueling, unrewarded, goes mostly unseen. Every system you encounter, from healthcare to social support to human interaction, is designed for people who can speak up, who can advocate, who can demand. You do none of those things. You rely on others to interpret your needs, to fight your battles, to remember that you're still a person. Some days, they do. Other days, they don't. And so you sit blinking through bureaucratic fog, trying to hold on to your identity, while the world decides what kind of inconvenience you are today. You're not a ghost, you're not a miracle, you're not a medical marvel waiting to wake up. You're just alive. And in a world that runs on noise and speed, being quietly conscious is sometimes the most invisible thing of all. You're not the first. That's both a comfort and a horror. Comforting because others have survived what you're surviving now. Horrifying because most of them didn't, not really. Some were forgotten, others were misdiagnosed, written off, declared gone when they were anything but. You're part of a long, grim tradition, a history of minds trapped in silence, while the world moved on without them. Your condition may be rare, But it's not new. And for most of history, locked-in syndrome didn't have a name. It was simply mistaken for death. One of the most well-known cases in recent memory is Jean-Dominique, a French journalist and editor-in-chief of Elle magazine. In 1995, he suffered a massive brainstem stroke at age 43. One moment, he was successful, stylish, influential. The next, he was trapped inside his body, able to move only his left eyelid. But Bawby wasn't willing to disappear. With that one working eye, he blinked out an entire memoir, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. A scribe sat beside him, reciting the alphabet in a specific order, and Bawby would blink to choose each letter. Letter by letter, word by word, he wrote about the vivid inner life he still experienced, the grief of being forgotten, and the absurdity of trying to spell out jokes with your eyelid. It took months, 200,000 blinks for a book just over 100 pages long. And still, he did it. A final act of authorship from inside the diving bell of his own skull. His story caught the world's attention because he was articulate, because he had connections, because someone noticed. But for every Bawby, there are dozens, maybe hundreds of people who never got the chance. People misdiagnosed as comatose, left in care homes, institutions, or worse, burial plots. It sounds dramatic, it isn't. History is full of cases where signs of life were missed or ignored. Before brain imaging, before eye-tracking software, before we even knew what locked-in syndrome was, a still body meant one thing: death. There are old stories, some folklore, some fact. I think of people waking up during funerals, of faint breath noticed just before burial, of scratch marks found inside coffins. Some of those stories were probably embellished, but not all of them. Catalepsy, certain forms of paralysis, and yes, locked-in syndrome, could easily have led to someone being declared dead too soon. In the absence of modern diagnostics, consciousness was judged by movement. If you didn't flinch, speak, or sit up, they assumed you were gone. They'd hold a mirror to your lips, wait for fog, maybe feel for a pulse. But if you failed their limited tests, the rest was a formality. The fact that some patients blinked at the wrong time, or didn't blink at all, sealed their fate. Even in the 20th century, long after we'd invented stethoscopes and electroencephalograms, mistakes still happened. In 1941, a woman named Rosemary Kennedy, sister to a future US president, underwent a lobotomy for behavioural issues. The procedure left her functionally immobile and nonverbal. Though not technically locked in, her condition mimicked many of its features. She was sent away, hidden, institutionalized. A woman who had once walked and talked was reduced to silence, and the world simply looked away. She lived that way for over 60 years. In more recent times, the case of Rom Huben in Belgium became another disturbing chapter. After a car crash in 1983, he was diagnosed as being in a vegetative state. For 23 years, doctors believed he was unaware, unresponsive, unreachable. Then, in 2006, new scanning techniques revealed the truth. He was fully conscious. He had heard every conversation, felt every touch, remembered every insult and moment of pity. For 2 decades, he had existed like a ghost in his own body, dismissed by every system designed to protect him. It wasn't a miracle. It was a failure of observation, a reminder that being alive and being seen are not the same thing. What links these stories isn't just the medical detail, it's the emotional aftermath, the confusion, the disbelief, the awkwardness of people realizing they've been talking around a conscious person for years. The heartbreak of knowing the trapped mind had waited all that time, listening, watching, hoping someone would look closely enough. It's the terrifying idea that you could be surrounded by people and still be profoundly alone, that your silence could be mistaken for absence, that your awareness could be reduced to a footnote, or worse, never written down at all. Now, with better imaging and more education, it's harder to miss cases like yours. But harder doesn't mean impossible. It still happens. People still fall through the cracks, not because of cruelty, but because of speed, burnout, system overload, because someone was tired, because someone assumed. And those assumptions can cost years, lives, voices that never got to speak. You are not the first forgotten mind, and you may not be the last, but at least now you're part of a known category, a label with a name, a definition, and a handful of stories behind it. It's not much, but compared to being mistaken for a corpse, it's something. You still feel everything. That's the part no one really understands. They see your still body, your blank face, your quiet eyes, and they assume the sensations are gone, like someone flipped a master switch and shut it all off. But locked-in syndrome doesn't turn off your sensory system. You're not numb, you're not dulled. You are, in fact, a raw nerve with no way to react. You feel touch, you feel temperature, you feel pain. You just can't do anything about it. That's the real kicker. It's not the absence of sensation. It's the awareness of it, without any control. It's knowing that something hurts and knowing no one can tell that it does. Start with the little things. An itch. Doesn't sound like much, right? Everyone has itches, but imagine one on your scalp that you can't scratch. Then one on your thigh. Then on the bridge of your nose. Now imagine those three happening at once, then imagine them lasting for hours. And when someone finally comes in to reposition you or wipe your face, they don't touch the right spot. You can't say a little to the left or under my shoulder blade. You can only hope they guess. And when they don't, the itch stays. It becomes a part of you, like a mosquito that's decided your body is its home and refuses to die. Now try thirst. It sneaks up on you slowly. At first, your mouth just feels dry. Then it becomes sticky. Then it becomes a low, nagging ache that sits in your throat and reminds you that your body still has needs. If you're lucky, someone brings a sponge soaked in water and presses it to your lips. If not, you wait and wait. Yeah, and wait. You remember what cold water tastes like. You remember the sound of ice cubes clinking in a glass. You imagine it in vivid, excruciating detail. And none of it helps. You're not just thirsty. You're haunted by the memory of being able to do something about it. You can feel pressure too. Your skin knows when it's been lying in one place for too long. You start to ache in strange, localized ways, the weight of gravity reminding you that you're still real, still physical. The pain builds. A hip, a shoulder, the base of your spine. The staff will reposition you eventually. Maybe on a schedule, maybe not. But pain doesn't wait for a schedule. And when it arrives, there's nothing abstract about it. You're not floating in a blissful void. You're stuck under 100-pound weight, waiting for someone else to lift it. People also assume that locked-in syndrome comes with some kind of emotional numbness, that because your face can't move, your emotions must be flatlined too, but your emotional range remains intact. Maybe even more vivid than before. You feel shame, embarrassment, rage, all of it. You feel it when someone speaks to you like a child. You feel it when you're left in a room too long without anyone checking on you. You feel it when a well-meaning stranger assumes you can't understand their words and says something cruel, thinking it won't register. But it does. It all registers. You are the surveillance camera in your own life. No power to change the footage, but front row seats to every moment. There's humour too if you can find it. You have to. Otherwise, the absurdity of it all would crush you. Like the time someone puts your socks on, inside out, and acts like they've performed a great act of compassion. Or when someone proudly announces that you look better today, as if your absolute immobility has somehow brightened up. You start to collect these moments, not because they're funny in the traditional sense, but because they're the only levity you get. It's gallows humour, delivered one blink at a time. Imagine having the world's most persistent mosquito bite and no arms forever. Now imagine that's the least of your concerns. You either laugh or scream, And screaming doesn't work anymore. Regret makes its entrance too. It creeps in during the quiet moments when there's no one in the room and no questions to answer. You think about what you didn't say, what you didn't do, arguments you thought were important that now seem idiotic, missed opportunities that now feel like entire lifetimes. You remember yelling at someone over nothing. You remember skipping dinner with a friend because you were tired, and now you trade months of your new reality just to go back and sit through that meal. Just to be in a chair you could move, to eat food you could taste, to speak a sentence without planning it an hour in advance. But you also feel the small good things, warmth on your skin, the pressure of a blanket tucked around you just right, music, if someone plays it near your bed, the vibration of a voice you love. These things still register, they still matter. You cling to them not because they fix anything, but because they prove that not everything is gone. You still exist, you still feel, and sometimes that's enough to get through the next hour. What you've lost is immense, but what you've kept is real too. The capacity to hurt, to laugh, even internally, to remember, to long, to want. You're not just a mind in a box. You're a person with sensations that never left, just the tools to respond to them. You are, for better or worse, still alive in every sense that matters. And sometimes that's the hardest part of all. Now that you're officially recognised as conscious, now that someone's finally acknowledged you're still in there, the hard questions begin. Not for you, of course. No one starts by asking you. The conversations happen around you, over you, about you. They're quiet and polite, full of clinical language and nodding faces. But what they're really asking is this: what do we do with you now? Because now that you're awake, you're not just a patient anymore. You're an ethical dilemma. A walking, or rather not walking, embodiment of every uncomfortable question modern medicine prefers to avoid. The first topic that comes up is usually your code status. Are you a full code patient, meaning everything must be done to save you if something goes wrong? Or are you DNR, do not resuscitate, meaning they'll let you go if your heart stops or you stop breathing? This is not a small distinction. It determines whether they call a crash team or quietly step aside. And here's the fun part. If you can't speak, and if no one documented your preferences beforehand, someone else gets to decide for you. Maybe it's your next of kin. Maybe it's a legal guardian. Maybe it's a hospital ethics committee you've never met. But someone is holding that decision in their hands, and unless you've blinked it out in time, it might not be what you want. Consent becomes a slippery word. Normally patients are asked before treatments are administered, before feeding tubes are inserted, before surgeries are performed. But you can't nod, you can't sign a form, you can't raise your hand. And while eye tracking systems and letterboards help, they're slow, prone to error, and not always present when decisions need to be made fast. So sometimes they skip the asking. They assume, they default to whatever the protocol says. You're a living contradiction, fully aware, but still considered passive. Autonomous in theory, but practically mute. And in that gap between theory and practice, all kinds of decisions get made for you. Some life-saving, some life-defining, and some quietly final. The truth is, most systems aren't built to handle someone like you. They like their patients, unconscious or recovered. Anything in between is paperwork. Your existence throws wrenches into protocols. Can you consent to surgery if it takes you 20 minutes to blink out a sentence? Can you refuse a procedure if someone misreads your answer? What happens when your expressed will conflicts with what your family believes you'd want? These aren't hypothetical questions. They happen all the time. Families fight, doctors hesitate, ethics boards convene and argue. Meanwhile, you lie there, blinking yes or no, hoping someone's paying close enough attention to get it right. Then there's the question everyone thinks about, but no one wants to say out loud. Do you want to live like this? Some will whisper, that it's no kind of life. Others will call you a miracle, a fighter, an inspiration, but few will actually ask you directly. And if they do, they often don't believe the answer. If you say yes, if you blink it out clearly, repeatedly, without confusion, they'll still hesitate. They'll question your mental state. They'll wonder if you really understand your condition. They might even assume you're just scared or confused. It's an unsettling paradox. You're lucid enough to know what you want, but too disabled for that to count the way it should. On the flip side, if you say no, if you blink out that you want care withdrawn, that you're done, that this existence is not one you want to sustain, then the ethical panic begins. Are you depressed, suicidal, lacking capacity? Surely you can't mean it. Surely no one would choose to die just because they're locked in. They say this while moving their arms, scratching their nose, walking out of the room under their own power. Suddenly your opinion is suspect. You're either too impaired to choose life or too impaired to choose death. Either way, your voice gets muffled under layers of protective doubt. Even in places with assisted dying laws, your condition complicates things. You can't self-administer anything. You can't sign forms. You can't even raise your head in agreement. The bureaucracy of death, like everything else, requires a body that works. So instead, you remain in limbo, not terminal by definition, but not thriving either. Just sustained, maintained, prolonged. It's not cruelty, it's not mercy, it's just what happens when the system can't quite decide whether to keep fighting for you or finally let go. And through it all, you remain the quiet constant in the room, still thinking, still blinking, still present. You hear the meetings. You track the shifts in tone. You know which nurses talk to you like a person and which ones treat you like furniture. You've learned to interpret the rhythm of the machines around you, to recognize when your name is said in a different tone, the kind that means something big is about to be decided. And even though you try to blink as clearly as you can, sometimes it's not enough. Sometimes the ethics move faster than your eyelid ever could. You are conscious, you are sentient, you are trapped in a body that no longer works, and in a system that's not quite sure whether to save you, pity you, or pretend you're not really there. The cruelest part isn't the helplessness, it's the awareness, the knowing, and the endless need to prove it matters. Years pass, somehow you're still here, still locked in, still dependent, still spelling out your thoughts one blink, one gaze, one slow, aching sentence at a time. But you've adapted, sort of. It's not resilience in the way people like to talk about it. You didn't make peace with your condition, and you haven't emerged from it with newfound wisdom or inner calm. You've simply survived, which, in a world that assumed you wouldn't last a year, counts as a kind of rebellion. You've outlived the prognosis, outlasted the disbelief, and while your body is still a monument to paralysis, your mind has gotten sharper in its confinement. Focused, hardened, bored beyond reason, yes, but observant in ways it never was before. Your days have a rhythm now, if you can call it that. A nurse wakes you. Not with a jolt, not with fanfare, just the usual light touch and practice greeting. You're washed, turned, fed through a tube. You listen to the same conversations on loop, about the weather, staffing issues, someone's nephew who's applying to college. You've memorized the schedules of the people around you. You can tell who's coming by the sound of their shoes in the hallway. You know who's patient with the eye tracker calibration and who gets frustrated after 5 minutes. You've come to expect mistakes, interruptions, the slow erosion of interest in your input. People mean well, but they move on. You don't. Technology helps, in fits and starts. Maybe you've got a fancy eye tracking setup now. One that lets you write emails, play basic games, or, if the system's behaving, browse the internet at glacial speed. You can listen to audiobooks, watch TV. Maybe you figured out how to blink a cursor across a keyboard fast enough to maintain a digital conversation, assuming the other person is very, very patient. Maybe you've even started writing something, a memoir, a letter, a document no one else will ever read, but that helps you hold the shape of your identity together. There are days when the tech fails, of course, days when the screen freezes, the camera slips, or your eye is too tired to cooperate. On those days, you wait. And remember what it was like to not wait for everything. Every year or so, someone suggests a new device or a new program, something that might make communication easier or more efficient. The promises always sound grand, revolutionary, and sometimes they are. But more often, they're just marginal improvements that still rely on you having the strength to stare at the right icon for long enough without blinking by accident. You learn not to get too excited about upgrades. They help, yes, but they don't free you. They just make your prison a little easier to decorate. You hear stories about people like you who manage extraordinary things. The ones who write books, give virtual lectures, get profiled in feel-good magazine features with titles like Trapped in His Body, but Not His Spirit. People love that narrative. Triumph over adversity, mind over matter. But you know the reality behind those headlines. You know that writing a single paragraph takes hours. That interviews are painstakingly edited to hide the delays. That no one talks about the exhaustion, the physical toll of concentrating for so long with just one eye, the mental fatigue of building sentences while your body sits frozen. You're proud of those people. Maybe you even tried to be one of them, but you also know that most of the time the camera pans away before the struggle becomes too real. Your life now is filled with small victories and long silences. You get good at tolerating things, discomfort, inefficiency, repetition. You learn how to let some thoughts go unspoken because they cost too much to express. You train yourself to simplify your opinions, your jokes, your needs, because complex ones require energy you don't always have. You watch people age, staff come and go, friends fade into memory, family members visit less often, some move away, some die. Grief hits differently when you can't weep, when your only outlet is the quiet sting of a remembered face, and the long hours afterward when no one notices your silence deepening. And yet, you are still here, you are still thinking, still aware, still forming new opinions about books and politics and the taste of apples, even if you haven't eaten one in years. You know things, you remember things. Your mind remains unreasonably alive in a body that hasn't twitched on command in a decade. People forget that. They assume stasis means stagnation, but you're still learning, still adapting, still growing, even if no one sees it happening. You are the same person, and also someone entirely different, not because your core changed, but because everything else was stripped away, and what was left had to learn how to breathe again, in stillness. There's no happy ending here, no big reveal, no miracle cure waiting just around the corner. There is only this, a life of sorts, not the one you chose, not the one you deserve, but a life nonetheless, with moments of meaning, with moments of pain, with long, unbearable hours that pass without event, and then the occasional blink that reminds someone you're still present, still participating, still refusing to disappear. And that, in a world that would rather not be reminded of what you are, is a quiet kind of defiance. The outside world moves on. That's the part no one warns you about. At first, everyone is around. The hospital room fills with visitors. They bring cards, flowers, books you probably won't read. They sit at your bedside, hold your hand, talk about hope. They promise you're not alone. And for a while, you believe them. The visits are frequent. The voices are familiar. You hear laughter, the creak of chairs being pulled close, the sound of life still reaching out to you. But slowly, quietly, the rhythm changes. The visits become shorter, less regular. The voices grow tired. They don't stop loving you. They just stop knowing what to say. It's not dramatic. No one storms out or declares they can't take it anymore. It happens gradually, like fog rolling in. Friends who once came every weekend start skipping a visit here or there. Then it's once a month, then maybe just holidays if they remember. Texts stop coming because you can't respond. Calls stop because holding a one-sided conversation gets exhausting. Social media, if you had it, moves on without you. Parties, vacations, weddings, all documented in detail, none of which include your name anymore. You're not angry, not exactly, just quietly aware that your place in the world has shrunk. You used to be a person people expected things from. Now you're a memory people feel guilty about when they have the time. Family holds on longer, usually. They show up more often, stay later, talk to the staff about your needs. But even that changes. They have lives, jobs, kids, routines that don't include blinking conversations and hospital-grade lighting. Some of them are just worn out. It's not fair to ask someone to stay frozen in time with you. So they begin to fracture under the weight of your condition. They say things like, she'd want us to keep living, or he wouldn't want us to suffer too. And they're not wrong. But you're still here, and their absence, however understandable, still leaves an echo. Medical teams rotate too. Doctors get reassigned. Nurses move to new departments. Physical therapists disappear and are replaced by new faces with new routines and slightly different levels of compassion. Every goodbye is quiet. You don't get closure. Just a new name badge and a different tone of voice. Some new staff will talk to you like you're present. Some will speak over you. Some won't speak to you at all. You get used to being reintroduced, to blinking out your basic needs again, for people who don't yet know your preferences. It's like being new at your own bedside, over and over again. Eventually, you learn to stop getting attached. Familiarity is a luxury the medical system doesn't always offer. Time becomes hard to measure. The seasons change only in the way the air feels coming in through the window or the decorations, taped to the wall by a nurse who still cares. Holidays arrive and pass like echoes. You hear someone mention, it's Thanksgiving, and you remember the taste of cranberry sauce, the noise of a crowded dining table. But here, it's just another day with pureed food and polite silence. Birthdays pass with less fanfare. No one forgets entirely. Someone brings a balloon or a card, but you stop expecting celebration. You don't need the attention. You just wish someone would remember your favourite song without being reminded by a sticky note on your chart. You notice who stays. There's usually at least one person, a friend, a sibling, a caregiver, who doesn't fade. They visit regularly. They know how to read your blinks without rushing. They remember your favourite stories, the jokes that still work, the topics to avoid. Their consistency becomes a kind of anchor. But even they get tired, and you never blame them. Not out loud, not in your thoughts, because you know what it costs to stay close to something so still. To someone so changed, loving you now requires endurance, not just affection. It's not about joy, it's about presence. You, meanwhile, stay in place. A still point in a rushing tide. You watch the world blur past. News headlines, new technology, political scandals. Everything rolls forward without waiting. You hear about new apps, new slang, new music you'll never listen to unless someone thinks to play it near your bed. Time becomes something that happens to other people. You exist in the margins, in the pauses between their momentum. And sometimes that makes you feel like a ghost in your own life, remembered only in fragments, mentioned only when someone stumbles across an old photo or memory. There's a bitterness in this kind of forgetting, but there's also a strange peace. You stop expecting anything, and without expectation, disappointment softens. You learn to find comfort in the smallest rituals. The nurse who always hums while changing your sheets. The way morning light hits the ceiling tiles. The brief flicker of warmth when someone brushes your hand without rushing. These moments become your milestones, not birthdays or promotions or vacations, just proof that life still touches you, even gently, even briefly, and so you remain, still breathing, still blinking, still present, even when the world forgets to look. Hope shows up eventually, not all at once and not like a sunrise chasing away the dark. It arrives in pieces, rumours, articles, whispers from the tech-savvy staff about new trials and devices, about brain-computer interfaces and AI-assisted communication. People start talking about the future like it's something you might actually be part of. You don't roll your eyes, you can't, but mentally, you brace for disappointment. Because by now, you've learned that most breakthroughs arrive with more headlines than results. Still, hope hangs around. It's not a cure, but it's something. You hear about the brain-computer interfaces first, electrodes implanted directly into the skull, signals read straight from your motor cortex, translated by algorithms into digital commands. It sounds like science fiction, and it is, but also not entirely. The research is real. There are people moving cursors with their thoughts, typing with their minds, even controlling robotic arms. The catch? These systems are slow, expensive, and experimental. Most are only available in clinical trials. They require teams of engineers, daily recalibration, and access to cutting-edge labs. You imagine trying to get approval for something like that when you can barely get the right blanket without waiting an hour. Still, it's hard not to wonder. The idea that you could think of a word and see it appear on a screen without blinking through every letter feels like magic. The idea that you could send a message faster than a carrier pigeon on sedatives. Revolutionary. You allow yourself to imagine conversations where you don't have to watch the listener age in real time. Jokes you could deliver before they stopped being relevant. Requests for things more complex than water and please adjust my pillow. But you also know that for most people like you, this tech is a distant glimmer, not a guarantee. It's a lighthouse on a shore you might never reach. In the meantime, you hear about improvements to the tools you already have. Better eye-tracking cameras, more responsive software, algorithms that learn your patterns and anticipate your choices. Some of them even use predictive text. Like your thoughts have their own autocorrect. The irony isn't lost on you. You used to hate autocorrect. Now you'd kill for an AI that guesses what you want to say and gets it right. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. One mistimed blink and suddenly you're saying potato instead of blanket and everyone's confused. Still, it's progress. Clunky, glitchy, occasionally absurd progress. But progress nonetheless. AI plays a growing role too. You hear about programs that can analyze your eye movement, your facial micro-expressions, even the tone of your breathing, to detect emotions, preferences, maybe even intent. It's supposed to make communication more intuitive. You wonder if someday your computer will just know what you want before you ask. But you also wonder how many errors it will make first, how many times it will guess wrong, how long it will take before smart really means helpful. And even then, the tech doesn't change the fact that you still can't move, still can't speak. It makes you faster maybe, but it doesn't set you free. The people around you call this hope. And in a way, they're right. These tools can mean the difference between isolation and connection, between being misunderstood and being able to say, no, not that, this. But hope, as you've come to understand it, doesn't fix anything. It softens, it illuminates, but it does not repair. No machine will give you back your limbs. No interface will let you run again, or laugh out loud, or pick up a pen. The best you can hope for is a more efficient version of locked in, a faster, sleeker cage. Still you cling to it, not because it's false, but because it's all there is. A study published last month about a new interface that lets someone type 30 words per minute using only thought. A team developing software that turns your eye movements into more expressive communication. A startup promising affordable access to adaptive tech that used to cost more than a car. You know better than to believe the hype, but you also know better than to give up entirely. Every improvement, however small, pushes the edge of your world a little farther out. You don't expect miracles. That's not what hope is, not anymore. Hope is getting a message across in half the time. Hope is someone installing a new version of your software and it actually working. Hope is fewer mistakes, faster replies, less frustration. Hope is a nurse who learns your setup without needing constant reminders. It's a technician who stays late to recalibrate the interface. It's a family member who reads about a new study and brings it to your bedside with cautious excitement. Hope is never the cure. It's the effort, the signal that you're still worth investing in. And that's what hope gives you, more than anything else. Validation. Proof that you're not an afterthought. That even if your body no longer plays by the rules, your mind still matters. That the world hasn't stopped trying to reach you, even if the reaching is slow, awkward, and expensive. It's not glamorous, it's not cinematic, but it's real. And for someone who once had nothing but blinks, that is enough to keep going. If you could speak, not blink, not spell, not slowly gesture through a screen, but actually speak, you'd say something simple. Not profound, not rehearsed, just something true. Maybe you'd start with, "I am still here," because that's the part the world forgets first. Not the body, not the silence, but the self. The person who didn't disappear just because the movement did. You'd want to remind them that you're not a symbol, or a diagnosis or a footnote in someone else's story. You're not a tragedy for inspiration blogs, or a burden for cautionary tales. You're a person, still whole, still present, even if the wrapping's all wrong now. You'd want them to know what it feels like to be alive in this specific, suffocating way, to exist in a space where your mind races and your body refuses to follow, to want things and know how to say them, but be forced to wait while someone points at each letter, like they're opening padlocks, one by one, on the door between you and the world. You'd tell them how time stretches when you're unheard, how dignity erodes when you can't say, "That hurts," or "Stop," or even "Thank you." You'd explain that patience is no longer a virtue. It's your entire operating system. You wouldn't want pity. You've had enough of that. People lowering their voices when they enter the room, or whispering about how brave you are when you're just trying to ask for more water. Pity doesn't make anyone listen longer or try harder to understand you. It just makes them feel better about not knowing what to do. If you could speak, you'd ask for something else. Curiosity, interest, the willingness to be uncomfortable long enough to actually connect. You're not fragile glass. You're not contagious. You're not a ghost haunting a bed. You're a living human being who happens to be very, very inconvenient. You talk about the noise inside your head, not madness, not chaos, just the constant awareness, the catalogue of sensations, thoughts, reactions you can't express until someone offers you a doorway. You'd want people to understand that you still feel joy, still laugh, still find meaning in a joke well-timed or a memory perfectly recalled, that your mind hasn't rusted over just because your face doesn't show it. You still have opinions, you still get annoyed, you still want music that isn't relaxing instrumental and stories that don't end with quiet acceptance. You'd like to argue again, to be sarcastic, to have the luxury of being misunderstood in real time. You used to take that for granted. You'd want them to know that surviving isn't the same as living, but sometimes it's the only option you get, and you take it. You hold on to it with quiet strength that no one writes novels about. You'd want to tell them that the worst part isn't the paralysis, or the pain, or even the slowness of it all. It's the invisibility, the way people look past you, around you, through you, the way your silence makes them uncomfortable, so they fill the room with empty words and leave too quickly. If you could speak, you'd ask them to slow down, just for a moment, to stay, to wait for your answer, to remember you're still in here, even when it takes you a while to arrive. You'd say that being trapped in your body didn't make you any less human, that your mind is still a crowded, messy, vibrant place full of hope and irritation and memory and curiosity, that you're not living a poetic tragedy, you're just living, in the way that anyone else is, day by day. And yes, it's hard, it's exhausting, but it's real. You'd want them to stop romanticizing suffering or turning your life into a metaphor. You're not here to teach lessons or make people feel grateful for their mobility. You're here because you didn't die, because you endured, and because no one gave you a choice but to keep enduring. You'd ask them to remember the others too, the ones still misdiagnosed, the ones blinking behind closed eyes and unheard voices, the ones who never got their name written on a chart with the word aware next to it. You'd say that locked-in syndrome isn't just a medical rarity, it's a reminder that consciousness isn't always visible, that agency can exist even in stillness, that people deserve to be seen even when they can't wave their arms for attention. And maybe, just maybe, at the end of it, you'd ask for something you haven't said aloud since this all began. Not freedom, not pity, not even understanding, just recognition. A nod, a look in the eye, the small sacred confirmation that you exist and that your existence still matters. You are still here, still thinking, still listening, still hoping, still human, still locked in. That brings us to the end of tonight's story. Not a journey of healing, but a long, unblinking stare into what it means to be conscious, forgotten, and still very much alive. If you're still awake, thank you for walking through history with me. If you'd like early access to more slow-burning descents into history's darkest corners and softest tragedies, along with perks like ad-free audio of these episodes, you'll find the Patreon link below. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment about the moment you realised awareness doesn't always come with a voice. And if you're listening on a podcast app, a review helps ensure these quiet stories get heard. Sleep well.